Welcome to a Dual Digest podcast where two friends dive deep into the topics that matter.
From technology and AI to science, history, and global trends, we break down complex ideas and make them easy to understand.
Whether you're here for insights, entertainment, or just some good conversation, we've got you covered.
Just remember, stay curious, question everything, and keep exploring the world around you. And remember, every great conversation starts with a curious mind. Let's explore together.
Make sure to follow and subscribe.
Welcome to our deep dive into Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I think, this book tackles some seriously big questions, technology, politics, religion.
Oh, even human stupidity.
Even human fallibility. All understand what's happening in the world today and what it really means for all of us.
And one of the things that makes this book, I think, so compelling is its global scope. It's not, focused on one country or one culture,
Right.
but on the forces that are really shaping the future of the whole planet,
It really is. It's fascinating. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Harari argues that the liberal story, which has been the dominant force in global politics for decades now, is facing a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
What exactly does he mean by the liberal story, and what are some of the reasons that he sees it kind of like faltering?
Yeah. So the liberal story, as Harari describes it, puts the individual, at the center, valuing liberty above all else. And it's this idea that you, as an individual, have the power to create your own destiny and fight for your freedoms. But he argues that this story, while powerful, is starting to show some, cracks, especially in the face of rapid technological advancements like the internet. Think about it. We never really voted on the internet, did we?
Yeah, that's true.
It kind of just, exploded into our lives, driven by engineers and algorithms.
And not by political systems.
Not so much by political systems now.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, it's like technology is outpacing our ability to make sense of it,
Yeah,
let alone, govern it.
exactly. And it's leaving a lot of people, I think, feeling disillusioned and left behind. Harari contrasts this with the past, where people in industrial jobs, like steel workers or coal miners, were seen as these, heroes
Right.
building the future.
Right. They were essential.
But today, those jobs are vanishing, and the old narratives around work and purpose are kind of breaking down.
So does this mean, is liberalism doomed?
Not necessarily. I mean, liberalism has faced crises before, even after devastating events like, World War I. But it's definitely at a crossroads. And Harari suggests that its biggest challenge may not be from external enemies, but actually from its own internal contradictions.
Well, interesting. Okay, so what are the alternatives? What other stories are kind of competing to fill the void?
He explores a few, including, the resurgence of nationalism,
Sure.
the enduring power of religion,
Right.
and even the potential rise of algorithms as authorities.
Oh, wow.
Each has its own allure and its own set of potential, pitfalls. But what's fascinating is that any successful story for the 21st century, according to Harari, will need to grapple with the twin revolutions of infotech and biotech. Those forces are not going away.
All right, so let's talk about one of those forces, AI. I got to admit, I'm kind of a sci-fi geek, so I'm always fascinated by this topic. But Harari's take on AI goes beyond just computers getting faster. He suggests it's about something much deeper, understanding and even hacking human biology and behavior.
Absolutely. He dives into how scientists are essentially decoding what it means to be human,
Yeah.
uncovering the biochemical mechanisms behind, our emotions, our desires, our choices. And as we learn more about these mechanisms, the line between humans and machines starts to, really blur.
Okay, that's where it starts to get a little mind-bending.
Yeah.
He even argues that human intuition, what we often think of as a uniquely human trait,
Right.
it's actually just a form of pattern recognition.
Mhm.
And if it's just patterns, then AI might be able to do it even better than us, right?
That's the question that he raises. He gives this example of comparing 10 billion AI doctors, each monitoring a single human being to 10 billion human doctors.
Okay.
Imagine, a new disease emerges.
Right.
The AI doctors, all connected and instantly updatable, could share information and adapt their knowledge in a split second.
Wow.
Human doctors, even the best ones, simply couldn't keep up. So it makes you wonder, would you trust an AI doctor? And what does it even mean to trust in that context?
Yeah, it's making me rethink, what it means to be human in the age of AI. And it's not just a philosophical question, is it? I mean, there are real-world implications, especially when it comes to jobs.
Oh, absolutely. Harari suggests that as AI systems become, more sophisticated, we might see the rise of a new, like a new useless class.
Oh, wow.
People who simply aren't needed in the economy because, machines can do their jobs better and faster.
Right, yeah,
It's a sobering thought.
it is.
And one that, ties into the anxieties many people feel about automation. Even jobs that seem secure today might be vulnerable tomorrow.
That's a scary thought.
And this brings us to, what Harari argues is perhaps the defining question of the 21st century.
Okay.
Data ownership.
Data ownership, right.
If we think about it, like, land ownership was everything in the agricultural age.
Right.
Then it was factories and machinery during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Now data is emerging as, kind of the most valuable asset.
It's like that old saying, information is power.
Right.
But like amplified to a whole new level. And the lines between humans and machines are getting like blurrier and blurrier all the time.
Yeah.
People are becoming so reliant on, technology, on being connected. Harari even talks about how in the future, we might be dependent on network connectivity from like the moment we're born. It's almost like we're becoming part of this like giant global brain.
He uses the term datism to describe this, emerging worldview where information flow is seen as like the ultimate good.
Wow.
And this raises a huge ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
Who should own and control all this data? Should it be you, the individual, the government, corporations, or perhaps, as you suggested, like, should data belong to some kind of human collective?
Honestly, I don't know. It's such a complex issue with so many like potential consequences. Harari warns that if we don't figure this out, it could lead to like a fundamental split in humankind,
Yeah.
not just economically, but even like biologically. It's a pretty stark warning.
It is. And it highlights, I think, the urgent need for, global dialogue and cooperation on this issue.
Yeah, for sure. But with all this talk of technology disrupting our lives, the rise of AI, this battle over data, you might think that humans are becoming more divided than ever.
Right.
Yet Harari makes this like surprising argument
Yeah.
about the ways that we're already united, despite the narratives of division that we, often hear.
He uses this clever thought experiment to illustrate this point. Imagine the medieval Olympics.
Medieval Olympics.
Of course, they've never existed.
Right.
But if they did, would they look anything like the Olympics that we know today?
Probably not. I mean, the very idea of like global sporting events with standardized rules and shared symbols
Yeah.
it seems like a modern invention.
Exactly. And yet the modern Olympics, for all their flaws,
Sure.
represent a remarkable level of international cooperation.
Yeah, it's true.
We agree on the rules, the scoring system, even like the symbolic language of medals and flags.
Right.
We take it for granted, but it's actually quite extraordinary.
That's a great point. It's like we're so used to the spectacle of the Olympics that we forget how much like global agreement is actually required to pull them off. It's not just about sports, it's about shared values and a willingness to like play by the same rules.
Precisely. And this, this underlying unity extends beyond sports. We've created global institutions from the United Nations to the World Health Organization that tackle shared challenges. We've built complex economic systems that rely on, international trade and cooperation. And as Harari points out, we've even managed to avoid global nuclear war for over 70 years, which is it's a testament to, this internationalist regime that emerged after World War II.
It makes you wonder, like, maybe we're not as divided as we sometimes think we are. Maybe we're actually, like, more interconnected and interdependent than ever before.
That's certainly Harari's argument. He suggests that the existence of common enemies like climate change, nuclear proliferation, even the potential downsides of AI further compel us to cooperate. In a way, these shared threats force us to, recognize our common humanity and work together to find solutions.
So what about religion? Does Harari see a role for like traditional faiths in helping us, navigate these global challenges?
His perspective on religion might surprise you. While he acknowledges the historical and cultural significance of religion, he argues that in an age dominated by science and technology, traditional faiths might struggle to remain relevant.
Why does he say that?
Well, he claims that religion's real expertise has always been interpretation, not, not providing practical solutions.
Okay.
For example, he points out that ancient synagogues didn't have gender segregation, which contrasts sharply with, present-day Orthodox Jewish practices.
Oh, interesting.
This illustrates how religious traditions can be, reinterpreted and sometimes even distorted over time.
So he's saying that religions are better at, like, explaining why things happen than actually solving problems.
In a way, yes. He suggests that modern economics has essentially become like a universal language,
Okay.
regardless of religious beliefs. Take the example of, the Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran.
Okay.
He might frame his economic policies in religious terms, but ultimately he's using the same, tools and concepts as economists in any other country.
It's like the underlying logic of, like, economics
Yeah.
transcends, like, cultural and religious boundaries.
Exactly. And this points to, I think, the diminishing influence of, traditional religions on practical matters.
Okay, so if, like, the old stories about, God and nation are losing their grip, how do we find meaning in a world where, like, those grand narratives are crumbling?
That's a question Harari spends a lot of time, exploring. He suggests that one of the most fundamental human desires
Yeah.
is to leave something behind.
Right.
To ensure that our personal story continues beyond our death.
It's like we want to believe that our lives have meaning,
Right.
that we're not just like random blips
Exactly.
in a cosmic timeline.
He even discusses romantic love as a form of meaning making. It's like losing yourself and the perceived infinity of the beloved, finding a sense of purpose and transcendence through another person.
That's an interesting way to think about love.
Yeah.
It's not just about, like, passion or companionship.
Right.
It's about creating a story
Yeah.
that gives our lives meaning.
And then there's the idea of self-sacrifice, which Harari argues can be a powerful way to strengthen belief in a story.
Okay.
It allows us to substitute tangible actions, for
Yeah.
more abstract obligations. He uses the example of, the Shiite Muslim commemoration of Ashura, where people engage in these intense rituals of, mourning and self-flagellation
Right.
to remember the martyrdom of Imam Hussein.
Yeah, it's a vivid example of how suffering and sacrifice can be, like, woven into a narrative that reinforces belief and creates this, like, powerful sense of shared identity. But it also raises the question, are we sacrificing for something real, or are we just clinging to a, like, comforting fiction?
That's the challenge, isn't it? To discern between, the stories that genuinely nourish us and the ones that ultimately hold us back. And it's a challenge that's even more complex in a world where we're, bombarded with information and competing narratives.
Harari argues that most people don't, like, fit neatly into a single story or belief system.
Oh.
We have, like, multiple identities that sometimes pull us in different directions. So how do we, like, reconcile those different parts of ourselves?
That's where he highlights the dangers of, fanatical creeds that insist on a single all-encompassing identity.
Right.
He uses fascism as like a prime example, explaining how people can even adopt fascist ideas without realizing it, because they fail to grasp the seductive nature of fascism.
So it's not just about, goose-stepping and wearing uniforms. It's about the underlying mindset that rejects complexity and demands total devotion to a single ideology.
Yeah.
And Harari argues that kind of thinking can be incredibly dangerous.
It can lead to, a kind of ideological blindness,
Right.
where people become so attached to a single story that they lose the ability to see the world clearly, to empathize with others, or to even question their own beliefs.
And it's not just like fascism.
Yeah.
I mean, any ideology, whether religious, political, or even, like, economic, can become dangerous if it becomes, like, too rigid, too absolute.
Exactly. Harari suggests that one of the most important skills we can develop in the 21st century is the ability to hold multiple perspectives.
Okay.
To embrace complexity and to recognize the limitations of any single story.
So how do we do that? How do we navigate this world of, like, competing narratives and avoid falling into the trap of fanaticism?
Yeah.
Maybe looking more closely at what Harari calls the liberal story can offer some insights.
He argues that the The liberal story, for all its flaws, offers a valuable framework for understanding the world.
Okay.
It emphasizes, the importance of individual liberty,
Uh-huh.
the power of reason,
Right.
and the need for tolerance and open debate.
So it's not about like rejecting liberalism outright.
Right.
It's about understanding its strengths and weaknesses
Exactly.
and recognizing its limitations.
He describes the liberal story as a belief in the individual as creator,
Okay.
with liberty as the supreme value. The two commandments of liberalism, if you will, are to create and to fight for liberty.
It's like liberalism encourages us to constantly like push boundaries,
Yeah.
to express ourselves, to challenge the status quo. But he also points out that liberalism, despite rejecting cosmic dramas, can end up recreating that drama within the individual. What does he mean by that?
Think about how people, craft their online identities these days.
Yeah.
They're constantly constructing like an idealized self, highlighting their accomplishments, filtering out anything negative.
Right.
They end up, mistaking this curated online persona for reality.
It's like everyone's starring in their own like personal movie,
Yeah.
trying to write the perfect script for their life.
Precisely. And it becomes this endless cycle of striving for validation, accumulating, likes and followers,
Right.
and constantly trying to prove your worth through, creative output.
So even as liberalism rejects like grand narratives, it can create a new kind of like inner performance.
Yeah.
This constant pressure
Yeah.
to create and achieve.
Yeah.
It's almost like a different kind of pressure than the pressure to, conform to traditional roles.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still pressure.
That's a great observation, and it highlights one of the key tensions, I think, within liberalism,
Yeah.
the tension between, individual freedom and the pressure to succeed, to constantly, create and reinvent yourself.
So how do we find like a balance? How do we embrace the creative energy of liberalism without, getting caught in the trap of self-promotion and endless striving?
Harari contrasts the liberal perspective with the Buddhist view, which goes even further by denying not just the cosmic drama, but also the inner drama of human creation.
Buddhism says there's no inherent meaning even in our own feelings and experiences.
That's right. Buddhists see feelings as ephemeral vibrations,
Okay.
appearing and disappearing without any, inherent purpose.
Yeah.
It's a radical way of thinking that can be quite liberating if you can fully embrace it.
Okay, that sounds a little bleak. No meaning, no purpose. Like, what's the point of it all then?
Well, that's where Harari reminds us that, there's no need for despair. He argues that suffering is the most real thing in the world,
Oh, wow.
and that it's a key to distinguishing between, fiction and reality.
So instead of asking what is the meaning of life, we should be asking how do we get out of suffering?
Exactly. And he offers this thought-provoking test for evaluating any grand story.
Okay.
Can the central hero of the story actually suffer?
Give me an example.
Well, let's take the story of, the Polish nation as the Christ of nations,
Okay.
as the poet Adam Mickiewicz described it.
Mhm.
Can Poland, as an abstract entity, actually, experience suffering?
Yep.
Or is the suffering limited to the individual people who live in Poland?
I see. So the test is whether the suffering is like real
Yeah.
or just a metaphorical device.
Yeah, precisely. And this focus on suffering isn't about pessimism. It's about, grounding ourselves in what is genuinely real. If we can face suffering directly without clinging to comforting fictions, we might be able to find true liberation.
Okay, now for something a bit more concrete, although no less challenging, let's talk about terrorism. Harari has some surprising things to say about this topic too.
Yeah.
He argues that terrorists are masters of, mind control, killing relatively few people, but managing to terrify billions
Mm-hmm.
and shake entire, political systems.
He compares it to like a theater of terror versus a theater of security.
Okay.
The terrorists put on, this horrifying show.
Right.
And the governments feel compelled to respond with an equally, dramatic display of force. He even argues that this overreaction can sometimes be, more dangerous than the terrorism itself.
Think about like the global response to 9/11.
Right.
It led to these like massive military interventions
Yeah.
in Afghanistan and Iraq, which, arguably caused far more suffering than the original attacks.
Exactly. It's like terrorists hijack our imaginations, forcing us to see them as like this existential threat, even when the actual danger they pose is statistically speaking, quite low.
So how do we avoid playing into their hands?
Harari suggests that we need to free our imagination from the terrorists' grip.
Okay.
He reminds us that statistically, we're far more likely to die in a car accident than a terrorist attack. It's about perspective and not giving in to fear.
But what if terrorists manage to get their hands on weapons of mass destruction? Surely that would change the equation entirely.
Absolutely.
Right.
Harari acknowledges that the nature of terrorism and of global politics would change, dramatically.
Yeah.
If small groups could, wipe out entire cities,
Right.
the world would become, much more dangerous place.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about war in general. Harari points out that the last few decades have been the most peaceful era in human history, but things seem to be getting more volatile recently. Is he concerned about the possibility of another major war?
He is. He points out that major powers haven't really, figured out how to wage successful wars in the 21st century. In
Interesting.
the past, you could loot cities, enslave populations, seize control of valuable resources.
Right.
But today, wealth is largely intangible. It's stored in data, in intellectual property, in complex financial networks.
So even if you manage to win a military victory, it's not clear how you would actually profit from it?
Exactly. And this uncertainty about how to win a modern war may actually be our best, safeguard against large-scale conflict.
Okay, so we've covered terrorism, war. Let's talk about human stupidity. The Harari dedicates a whole chapter to this, arguing that humans are prone to believing, all sorts of ridiculous stories. He even suggests that this tendency towards self-deception might actually be our greatest weakness.
He uses the example of, different cultures claiming to have invented everything from airplanes to nuclear weapons thousands of years ago.
You have Hindu nationalists claiming that ancient sages invented rockets and missiles.
Right.
Chinese nationalists proclaiming that, gunpowder and the compass were Chinese inventions from time immemorial.
Yeah.
And of course, Jewish nationalists asserting that the entire universe was created just so that, Jewish rabbis could study the Talmud. It seems like every culture has its own creation myth, placing itself at the center of the universe.
And Harari points out that these national myths often go hand in hand with the sense of superiority.
Right.
And a tendency to dismiss the achievements of other cultures.
Yeah.
He even, criticizes his own people, the Jews, for claiming to be the source of all morality and wisdom.
He's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom, even when it comes to his own cultural background.
And that's what makes his analysis so, I think, refreshing. He encourages us to question everything, to be skeptical of grand narratives.
Right.
And to recognize, our own tendency towards self-deception. He argues that in this age of information overload, we actually know less than we think we do.
That's kind of a paradox, isn't it? We have access to more information than ever before.
Right.
Yet we're becoming more ignorant.
It sounds counterintuitive, but Harari explains that it's because we're increasingly relying on, groupthink rather than individual rationality.
Okay.
We tend to, surround ourselves with like-minded people and consume news that, confirms our existing biases.
Right.
We rarely challenge our own assumptions or expose ourselves to different viewpoints.
So we're all living in these echo chambers, filtering out anything that doesn't fit our preconceived notions.
Exactly. And even if we're presented with factual information that contradicts our beliefs, we're likely to, to dismiss it or rationalize it away. Our tribal instincts often trump our desire for truth.
And this isn't just limited to ordinary people, is it? I mean, he says even presidents and CEOs can fall victim to this knowledge illusion.
That's right. Harari argues that the more power someone has, the harder it becomes to actually, discover the truth.
Wow.
They're surrounded by advisors who tell them what they want to hear. They're constantly bombarded with, information that reinforces their existing worldview.
It's like they're trapped in a bubble.
Yeah.
Isolated from the real world.
He even uses the analogy of a black hole of power to describe this phenomenon.
Yeah.
The gravitational pull of authority is so strong
Right.
that it sucks in all the surrounding information
Yeah.
and distorts it to fit the existing power structure.
So how do we escape this black hole? How do we break free from groupthink and actually learn something new?
Harari suggests that we need to cultivate, humility and open-mindedness.
Okay.
We need to be, willing to admit that we don't know everything,
Right.
to listen to opposing viewpoints,
Uh-huh.
and to constantly question, our own assumptions.
That card.
He also talks about the importance of wasting time, allowing ourselves to explore unproductive paths,
Okay.
to wander down dead ends.
Yeah.
To simply be curious without any specific goal in mind.
It's in those moments of like unstructured exploration
Yeah.
that we often stumble upon the most like valuable insights.
Mm-hmm.
But in a world that's constantly demanding our attention,
Right.
finding the time and space for curiosity can be a real challenge.
It is, but Harari argues that it's essential if we want to break free from the echo chambers and truly understand the world around us.
Now, all this talk about truth and ignorance leads us to the issue of fake news, which Harari argues is nothing new.
Right.
He points out that humans have been, creating and believing in fictional stories for millennia.
He goes all the way back to, ancient religions, explaining how they used elaborate myths and rituals to create, a sense of shared identity and purpose. He even suggests that some of these, ancient stories were deliberately fabricated
Right.
to manipulate and control people.
So it's not just like Facebook and Twitter
Right.
that are spreading fake news. It's been happening for centuries.
That's Harari's point.
Wow.
He argues that humans are storytelling animals,
Right.
and we're wired to believe in narratives even if they're, not true.
He even quotes Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister,
Yeah.
who allegedly said that a lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth.
Right.
It's a chilling quote
It is.
that highlights like the power of repetition
Mm-hmm.
and emotional manipulation
Yeah.
in shaping our beliefs.
And that power is, amplified in the age of social media, where information, both true and false, can spread, with lightning speed.
So how do we protect ourselves from being brainwashed by, propaganda and misinformation?
Harari suggests that the key is to develop, critical thinking skills. We need to learn how to evaluate sources, to distinguish between, fact and opinion,
Right.
and to recognize the emotional techniques that are often used to manipulate us.
He also talks about the importance of being aware of, our own biases, understanding how like our personal experiences and group affiliations shape our perceptions of the world.
Exactly. It's not about becoming completely objective, which is probably impossible.
Right.
But about recognizing the filters, through which we see reality.
Now, one of the most entertaining chapters in the book is about science fiction and how the future depicted in movies is often wildly inaccurate.
Yes. Harari has a lot of fun with this topic.
He does.
He argues that, most science fiction movies are actually just retelling old stories, but with futuristic technology.
Okay.
They often miss the truly transformative, implications of scientific advancement.
He uses the example of The Matrix,
Yeah.
arguing that like the real revelation isn't, that we're living in a computer simulation,
Right.
but that our minds are always being like manipulated,
Yeah.
whether by algorithms or by the the narratives that we believe in.
That's a brilliant insight.
It is.
And it connects back to his argument about the nature of consciousness, We're not these like pure autonomous individuals who are free to choose our own destinies.
Yeah.
We're products of our biology, our culture, and the stories we tell ourselves.
So there's no escaping the Matrix.
Not really, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Harari suggests that even if we can't, control the way our minds are shaped, we can at least become aware of the forces that are, influencing us.
Now let's talk about education.
Mhm.
If the world is like changing so rapidly, how do we like prepare our children for the future?
That's a challenge that parents and educators are grappling with, all over the world. Harari argues that traditional methods of education are becoming, obsolete.
Okay.
We can't just teach kids, facts and skills that will quickly become outdated.
So what should we be teaching them?
He suggests focusing on, the four C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. These are the skills that will be essential in a world where, change is the only constant.
So it's not just about like memorizing facts, it's about learning how to learn.
Exactly. We need to equip our children with the tools to adapt, to solve problems, and to think creatively.
Right.
He also talks about, the importance of understanding how to navigate a world without grand narratives.
The old stories about, God, nation, even the individual self are crumbling,
Hmm.
and it's not clear what will replace them. We need to, teach our children how to find meaning and purpose in a world where the old certainties no longer hold.
He suggests that one of the most important things we can do for our children is to encourage their curiosity, to help them, develop a love of learning, and to teach them, how to think for themselves.
It's about empowering them to become like lifelong learners, to be adaptable and resilient in the face of change.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, they'll be the ones to create the new stories that will guide humanity in the 21st century.
Yeah.
It feels like we're living in this time where like everything is being questioned, and the old stories just don't seem to fit anymore. It's exciting and a little bit like unsettling all at the same time.
It's definitely a time of transition, and Harari argues that this sense of uncertainty and unease is actually something that we need to get comfortable with. He suggests that clinging to outdated stories, whether they're about nationalism, religion, or even our own individual identities, can actually prevent us from finding real solutions to the challenges that we face.
Now, how do we let go of those old stories without falling into like despair or nihilism?
Right.
How do we find meaning and purpose in a world that, feels increasingly fragmented and uncertain?
Harari doesn't, he doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't give us like a new grand narrative to replace the ones that are, crumbling.
Okay.
Instead, he challenges us to confront reality, as it is,
Yeah.
without the comforting illusions of the past. He encourages us to embrace uncertainty, to cultivate, critical thinking skills, and to develop a deeper understanding of ourselves and the forces that shape our world.
One of the things that really struck me about the book is his emphasis on meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
It seems like a very personal, even spiritual practice, but he argues that it has these like profound implications for how we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
Absolutely. Harari practices Vipassana meditation, which he describes as a technique for, observing the mind directly without judgment.
Okay.
He suggests that this practice can help us, develop a clear understanding of our own, thoughts, emotions, and motivations,
Maybe.
which is essential if we want to, make wise decisions in a world that's constantly trying to like manipulate our attention and influence our behavior.
It's like he's saying that before we can change the world, we need to like understand ourselves. We need to be aware of like our own biases,
Right.
our own like tendencies towards, self-deception, our own vulnerabilities to manipulation.
Exactly. He argues that self-awareness is it's the foundation for everything else. It's
Yeah.
the key to, breaking free from the echo chambers, to developing critical thinking skills, to making, conscious choices about the kind of world we want to create.
It's not about like retreating from the world. It's about engaging with it in a more,
Yeah.
mindful and compassionate way.
Mm.
And maybe, just maybe, that's how we start to write a new story for humanity. A story that's not based on like fear or division, but on, understanding, empathy, and a shared commitment to creating a better future.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
And I think that's ultimately what Harari is calling for, a new kind of humanism, one that's grounded in reality, informed by science and technology, and driven by compassion and a deep sense of interconnectedness.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed by, the complexity of the world, the pace of change,
Yeah.
the constant like barrage of information,
Right.
maybe maybe 21 Lessons for the 21st Century is the book you need, right now. It's not a book that will give you all the answers, but it will certainly give you a lot to think about.
It's a book that challenges us to, question everything,
Yeah.
to rethink our assumptions about the world,
Right.
and to consider the possibilities of a future that's still being written.
And maybe, just maybe, it will inspire you to pick up a pen and start, writing your own chapter in that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, and we encourage you to, continue exploring these important questions.
Make sure to follow and subscribe.